Max Verstappen's worst weekend of the year was triggered by a botched setup change, which was aggravated by a collision involving teammate Sergio Perez and a strong recovery by championship challenger Lando Norris. And he wasn't thrilled about it, telling everyone what he thought of the car, especially on Saturday. The Red Bull driver described his car as a monster in Monza, but spoke of improvements to the car's disconnected balance in Azerbaijan, at least until Red Bull pursued what he saw as the incorrect setup route between final practice and qualifying. After this, he went insane, but to his surprise, Horner lashed back and humiliated him, putting him back in his place. Verstappen became much more cautious on Sunday following the race. What happened on Sunday will frustrate Red Bull, considering the hopeful indicators earlier in the weekend. Worryingly, Verstappen has never struggled as much as he is now. And now that Horner is embarrassing him and urging him to cool down, things are going to get worse if nothing changes. For Red Bull, it happened faster than anticipated. McLaren has surpassed Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, leading by 20 points immediately following Baku. The collision with Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz lost Red Bull 15 points. Without the collision, the reigning champion may have considered the Baku race at least partially successful. The anxieties have grown significantly. Perez's Red Bull was half of the overall loss. Of course, the newly built underbody was also broken. The Milton Keynes crew is already pushed to its limits as new underbody specs are regularly produced out of thin air. Team boss Christian Horner admitted the seriousness of the situation. Spare parts are in short supply. We will have to work through 5 days at home in the factory to get the necessary parts to Singapore in time for Friday. Nonetheless, Horner attempted to look on the bright side. Checo had the two front runners in front of him until the end. Although he was driving in turbulent air the whole time, the tyres held up. He was on course for a podium when Sainz shot him down. A second place was possible, because Leclerc's rear tyres were completely worn out. Red Bull saw Perez's evident improvement in form as evidence that the underbody adjustments had been beneficial. Head of Engineering Pierre Wachet is hopeful that the Monza incident has shown the engineers where portions of the underfloor are producing the instability that has sent the drivers off course. Horner told an interesting story about this. "We have traced the development history, and it turned out that the first mistake happened to us with an underbody upgrade in Barcelona in 2023. That was also the Grand Prix when Checo started to have problems with the car. We just didn't take it so seriously, because Max went on to win." Head of Sport Helmut Marko adds, "We then took a really wrong turn this year in Imola." Red Bull's message in Baku was to convey hope. The squad, which has been pampered by success, is mentally unsettled since they are not used to having to explain losses. This is especially true for the technical office, which has been blamed for not operating after Adrian Newey's departure. Which is obviously absurd. The renowned engineering master was still around when the RB20 was created, and he won 4 of the first 5 races. His influence in the car's design was supposedly minimal. Marko says that Newey would have helped with the setup search on occasion, since he can interpret the driver's remarks and convert them into technical language better than anybody else. He could possibly have been useful in Baku. Max Verstappen was far from his usual form, despite Sergio Perez's impressive performance. When he criticised his car again on Saturday, it did not go over well with the squad. As a result, the world champion tempered his remarks following the race. It even got so far that Horner himself had to cool down Red Bull's star driver, as internally some are getting annoyed by the Dutchman's arrogance and temper. Verstappen's tale in Baku demonstrates that Red Bull's troubles are far from fixed. The RB20 is a risky car. It is really tough to adjust it so that the balance is correct and the tyres are in the optimal window. Verstappen's Red Bull was set up little differently from Perez's, but this made a significant impact on the track. "Max wore out the tyres much faster in traffic than Checo," said Horner in amazement. "Normally it's the other way round. Perez added a tiny gurney flap to his rear wing, which increased downforce but reduced his peak speed by 3 km/h on the finishing straight. And he was a little gentler on the back axle. Verstappen had already complained in qualifying about a car that understeers at the corner's apex and leaps with the rear. This could not be fixed for the race, since nothing can be modified at the pertinent spots of the Parc Fermé. The Dutchman described how it came about. He was still pleased with his automobile on Friday. All the setup changes we made initially went in the right direction. We went one step further before qualifying. But that was one step too many. We paid a price for this risk. When we found out where the mistake was, it was too late. Then a challenge to all those who already see McLaren as world champions. We win and lose as a team. The battle for the title is not yet lost. Verstappen said after the race, but only after he had been pressed by the higher-ups, just so that the storm surrounding Red Bull will lay down once more. But still, they are now behind, and will they even be able to catch up again? They seem to think so, as Red Bull team head Christian Horner has declared that the incumbent Formula One Constructors' Championship winning team must now attack after being overtaken by McLaren. Horner emphasized the damage limitation, saying, "I mean, if you look at it before the weekend, based on where we were in Monza, what has he taken? 3 points off him." However, he conceded, "It's frustrating, particularly after where Lando qualified, that we didn't beat him, but thankfully he hasn't scored big points. But we've got to build on what we've learned already, and there's still a lot of racing to do. We took a big hit in the Constructors today, but we've got 20 points as deficit now, so we've got to attack. Still got 7 races to go, 2 sprint races to go. There's a lot of points up for grabs, and a lot of different circuits coming up, so it's far from over." Verstappen's lack of coordination with his RB20 was highlighted when Perez out-qualified his teammate for the first race since Miami last year. The Mexican showed his finest form of the season to fight Piastri and Charles Leclerc. But when Sainz entered the race for the lead as his Ferrari teammate stumbled on rapidly degrading hard tyres, team play came back to haunt Perez. At turn 1, Leclerc moved to the outside of Perez, leaving him high and dry, allowing Sainz to pass. But as the pair drove out of turn 3 side by side, both pursuing Leclerc's toe, they collided, leaving both cars with serious damage in the wall. Frustrating, because with Checo, he certainly should have been on the podium, at the very least in 3rd place, probably 2nd, Horner said of Perez's performance. "I think actually he could have won that race, had it not been for... He lost a lot of time behind Alex Albon initially, and then Lando, whilst he was on new tyres, and Oscar was still out on the old tyres. Lando backed him up, which allowed Oscar to keep track position, and I think without that, we would have been ahead of Oscar, and he would have passed Leclerc, and he would have been fine, so hugely frustrating." Concerning the incident as a whole, Horner said, "You can quite clearly see that Carlos, if you take the wall as a reference, and the white line on the right-hand side of the track, you see him look in his mirror and just drift to the left, knowing that he was there, and Checo doesn't move left or right. So hugely frustrating to lose that." What are your thoughts? Was Sainz to blame? And even more important, will Red Bull be able to recover their deficit? Are they really able to bring some updates that will work this time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.